Although neo-vintage watches were once regarded as the awkward middle child of the horological world, they're now experiencing a considerable amount of renewed interest. And it's not without good reason. Their old-school styling caters to enthusiast nostalgia, while their modern engineering ensures that they can keep up with today's standards. Just take the Longines Legend Diver, for instance. As a 21st century reissue of the late 1960s 7042 reference, the watch has quickly become one of the Swiss heritage brand's best-selling models. The question is, though, is the piece merely a love letter to a lost age, or does it actually hold up against the current crop of divers? There's only one way to know. Let's dive in. In contrast to most contemporary dive watches, the Longines Legend Diver is designed to look like the super compressors that were popular in the 60s and the 70s. Accordingly, it sports a pair of crowns at 2 and 4 and a bidirectional inner rotating bezel rather than an external unidirectional piece with an insert. It's worth noting, though, that the Legend Diver isn't a true super compressor, and that the caseback will not actually tighten under pressure. It's only made to resemble one. Even still, the Legend Diver definitely looks the part. Inspired by Longines 7042 reference, it comes with a slim, vintage-style case, an eye-catching mid-century dial, and a sharp stainless steel mesh bracelet. With its curved lugs and brilliant polish, it proves an incredibly handsome piece. It's undeniably retro, sure, but not in a way that seems cheap or chintzy. On the contrary, pair this piece with some loafers and some linen, and you're bound to make an impression in practically any room. More than anything, though, we initially liked the Legend Diver because it's unique, if a little bit niche. In a market awash with derivations of the Rolex Submariner, Longines has managed to create something that honors its history while simultaneously standing apart as something unto its own. Much of the Legend Diver's old-school aesthetic comes from its shape, even if the case is a little large for a vintage watch at 42mm wide, 13.5mm thick, and 52mm lug to lug. That's because between the absence of an outer bezel and the slope of the curved lugs, the case has a distinctively retro feel to it. Granted, the freshly polished finish and lack of patina won't fool anyone. In hand, however, it bears a striking resemblance to its ancestor. Close your eyes and you'd be none the wiser. Around the case, you'll find a number of other vintage-informed design details too. For instance, each crown comes with a cross-hatched pattern reminiscent of those found on the super compressors made in the 60s and 70s. Though the originals were simple pull-out pieces, Longines has updated the Legend Diver with screw-down crowns for extra security. We can appreciate the intentions behind the decision, but super compressors aren't exactly known for their user-friendliness. With wetter gloved hands, we'd imagine that they could prove pretty challenging to use, particularly when it comes to trying to line up the bezel. On the caseback, you'll find yet another retro touch, an old-school diver motif. Equal parts flash and function, it features a screw-down design that enables an impressive 300 meters of water resistance. The watch may look like a gentleman's diver then, but it's plenty capable beneath the surface, especially when you consider that most wearers are unlikely to take it for anything more than a quick splash. For this reason, we loved the case because of its versatility. That is to say, in contrast to most of the options on the market, the Legend Diver doesn't scream tool watch. With its inner rotating bezel and rounded profile, it almost looks like a dress watch from some angles. It slips under the cuff far easier than something heftier like a Tudor Black Bay. By far the most interesting part of the Legend Diver, though, is the dial and the bezel. In the case of our classic black on steel example, Longines has opted for a rich black lacquer, but there are plenty of other variations should you be after something with a bit more color. Housed beneath a domed sapphire crystal, the dial's glossy surfaces can be prone to reflection depending on the angle. Nevertheless, the dial's balanced layout ensures that it is surprisingly easy to read. Demarcated with large Arabic numerals at 12, 6, and 9, as well as some slim vintage-colored hashes to mark the other indices, it provides plenty of contrast when telling the time. And here's the thing, Longines has made very little changes to the design when compared with the original. Apart from a small date window at 3 o'clock and a handset pulled from the 7594 reference, the watch remains strikingly faithful to the 7042 reference. The bezel, too, keeps with the trend, indexed with numerals at 15, 30, and 45 seconds, and set off by a large lume triangle at 60. We especially liked this feature because it makes the watch both highly legible and also incredibly functional. Whether you're keeping track of bottom time or you're timing your laundry, it's super handy as an elapsed minutes counter. That being said, super compressor style divers are not without their nuances. For instance, underwater, the screw-down crowns can be difficult to operate with wetter gloved hands. Of course, we didn't have any issue with such a quirk when wearing the Legend Diver on land. Assuming you're after something for more professional applications though, it might be best to consider other options. However, the watch is more than capable enough for casual use. While the Legend Diver is pretty average in terms of width, at least compared to modern divers, the lugs are definitely on the longer side. As such, it takes a bit of experimentation to get a comfortable fit, and the shape of your wrist will ultimately determine whether the watch works for you. When set on the included stainless steel mesh bracelet though, we found that the Legend Diver is super comfortable and also highly accommodating. The mesh links feel and look fantastic on wrist, and they really help to give the watch some of its characteristically vintage charm. It's worth noting though, that we sized the bracelet about as small as possible, with several half links removed and the micro adjust on its tightest setting. Should your wrist be smaller than 6.5 inches, you might want to consider one of Longines leather-backed or synthetic straps. Oh, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that there's also a 36mm model. We were able to get on with the 42mm case size quite well, but those of us with smaller wrists, or those who prefer a more true-to-vintage feel, would certainly prefer the shorter lug-to-lug profile. Behind the engraved diver case back, you'll find that Longines has crafted the Legend Diver around its L888 automatic movement. Based on the architecture of the ETA 2892 caliber, it retains the movement's time and date functionality, whilst also boasting a number of notable upgrades. So, in addition to a higher 3.5 Hz frequency, it also sports a silicon balance spring, an improved 72-hour power reserve, and some rock-solid anti-magnetic properties. Though the movement is not as prestigious as some of the competition, it does at least allow for some pretty respectable performance, especially considering the watch's price point. In fact, Longines is so confident in the reliability and the accuracy of the L888 that each Legend Diver comes with a generous 5-year warranty. Unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to crack open the case and take a look at the movement at work. However, the solid caseback is much more period correct than a see-through display back, and we love the detail on the old school diver. If you're after some mid-century style but you can't commit to the idea of buying vintage, Longines Legend Diver is the perfect piece for you. A faithful reinterpretation of the brand's 1960 7042 reference. It combines a beautiful retro design with a unique super compressor style construction and a respectable ETA-based movement. Now, it doesn't carry quite the same brand notoriety as watches from the likes of Omega and Rolex. However, when you're looking for something a bit less mainstream, the Longines Legend Diver is one option that's guaranteed to make you stand out in a sea of imitators.